Good afternoon and very warm welcome to all. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jost, your host for this webinar. OKRs are a flexible way to plan and adapt strategy in a world of rapid change and predictability, competition, and opportunity. In this webinar, Agile Strategies founder and managing director Daniel Montgomery will present an overview of OKRs and answer your questions about how to use OKRs to achieve transformation in your organization. In addition, he will describe how the new paradigm impacts areas of concern to the HR function, particularly practices of individual goal setting, feedback, and incentives. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. All phones are set to mute, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat window located beside the presentation panel. We have received several questions from the registrants which will be answered by the speaker during the Q&A. Also, you can continue sending your questions during the presentation and we will try to answer them during end of the session. And if you do not receive answers to your questions today, we will definitely share them with you through email. So before we move on to the session, I would like to introduce our speaker, Daniel Montgomery. He's the founder and managing director of Agile Strategies. His passion is to enable the workplace to be a theater for growth for the individual, the organization, and society as a whole. This interest has led him through careers as a human resource professional, a psychotherapist, a systems and process designer, an executive coach, and a business strategist. His focus on OKRs is the culmination of these interests. Dan and his team guide diverse clients through a process of strategic thinking, translation of strategies into objectives and key results, action, and learning. Prior to founding Agile Strategies, Dan worked in senior consulting positions for Accenture, Ernst & Young, and the Balanced Scorecard Institute. Dan's award-winning book, Start Less, Finish More: Building Strategic Agility with Objectives and Key Results, is available on Amazon. Please don't miss to check that out. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Joes. Great to be here today. I'd like to start with a couple of poll questions just to get a little sense of the audience here. Here's the first one. Are you currently using OKRs in your organization, or is it something that you're just beginning to study? So please go ahead. I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that, and we'll see what the percentages are. That will certainly help me target some of the things I'm going to say. Joes, let me know when you're ready to close the poll.
Yes, we still have 15 seconds left.
Okay.
Almost 70% have voted. So here are the results.
Okay, so we can see about 70% of you are using OKRs in your organization already, and that's great. So, particularly you may have more questions about how to sustain them and expand them than wanting to know exactly what they are, and we would welcome any kinds of questions that you have for us. Let me move on to the next question, which is, how do you deploy and manage your OKR framework? Sometimes we use the term instrumentation. Some people use spreadsheets. Some people use a dedicated software package. So just give us an indication of whether it's one of those two or something else.
64% have voted. We encourage all the audience to participate in the poll. Wow, I see 73% of our audience have voted.
Okay, so well over half of you are using some form of dedicated OKR software, only 22% on spreadsheets. And that's certainly something that we see, even with a very sophisticated spreadsheet. As soon as you get 2 or 3 quarters out and you're cascading the OKRs throughout the organization, it gets very, very complicated. And we recommend, certainly we use spreadsheets when we're developing OKRs, but you really need software to make it transparent and workable in the organization. So thanks for your participation in that. And with that, I will launch into my presentation. I want to start off with a sort of great American business story here. And it's about Sears. So Sears was founded in the 1890s, a long time ago, 130 years ago, and was really the Amazon of its day. The founders, Mr. Sears and Mr. Roebuck, recognized that there was an opportunity to provide retail services for people who lived in small towns and farms in the US Midwest in particular. That was an area that it was very populated. We had a large rural population, and these folks did not have access to all the kinds of consumer goods they'd wanted. And so Sears used the mail to send out catalogs to people. You could then mail back in your order, and your goods would be delivered to the nearest train depot, which was very effective. It was like the Amazon of its day, taking advantage of the existing technology. If you go back about 20 years, they had 3,500 stores in the US and Canada. Today, there are just a tenth that many, just about 300 stores. None left in Canada, a few left in the US. So this is really a story about what we call strategic agility, which is something that we're all striving for. In the beginning, for a long time, Sears was a very agile company. They started off with this catalog business when we had a large rural population and small town population. As the United States became more urbanized and then suburbanized, they started building retail stores. And by 1931, they were selling more through bricks and mortar retail stores than they were through their catalog, although they continued the catalog until relatively recently. So they were a pioneer in creating anchor stores in suburban shopping malls. They did a lot of other innovative things. They created their own brands for tools, for appliances, for clothing, for a lot of things. And you could buy anything from Sears. They even were the first to pioneer the first use of a credit card that offered points, the Discover card. So they were a very, very innovative, agile company that was tracking along with a lot of changes in society. People moving into cities and then into suburbs, people starting to use credit cards instead of cash, and all of that kind of thing. And then a few years ago, things changed. Amazon came along, and Sears was not able to change the way to move into an online kind of framework. And as far as their bricks and mortar department stores, they didn't do anything to really compete with, you know, the big box stores like Home Depot or Walmart or people like that. So they just started fading and then resorted to financial engineering in order to keep trying to turn a profit, which ultimately didn't work for them. And so today, there are only about 300 stores left. So this tells us that this is not a new idea. This has been around for a long time. The idea that you need to build the capacity for strategic agility in your organization or you won't survive. There is no sustainable source of competitive advantage. So what this means is you're continually sensing what's going on in your market and responding to it. And the response is a very important point, because if you looked at Kodak, for instance, they actually invented the digital camera. They knew that some of the Japanese companies were starting to actually sell digital cameras, but they had so much invested in their old way of doing things that they didn't actually adapt, even with the technology that they themselves invented. So strategic agility is really the big goal that we're after. And how do we get there? Well, OKRs are a primary tool to develop strategic agility. So let's just review really quickly what OKRs actually are. I like to think of OKRs fundamentally as a language. They're a way to talk about goals. So you combine the idea of objectives and key results. The objective is a qualitative statement of where you're trying to go, It ties in with the strategy. It ties in with the why or the purpose of your organization. Objectives should be inspiring and they should be transformational, even slightly uncomfortable. How do we do that? How do we actually go to the moon? We've never done that before. Key results, on the other hand, are very quantitative metrics that you use to determine if you're actually fulfilling the objective. So I like to say that the key results keep you honest. With the objective, it's easy to say that you're achieving it. The objective is actually subjective in that sense. The key results are what really keep you honest. I like to say that the objective is poetry. It's inspiring, it's illuminating. The key results are like prose, and you really need both in this kind of language. So what does that have to do with strategic agility then? OKRs are a primary tool for closing the gap between strategy and execution. And these are some of the things that Agile organizations need to do today in order to be adaptive. You need an alignment to the strategy. You need a shared awareness throughout the organization of where are we all trying to go together. And in order to do that, that old format of having a hierarchical organization structure doesn't work as well anymore. That was a great organizational structure for organizations in a very stable market, but it's not so good when you're constantly dealing with opportunities and problems you've never dealt with before. So you need to break down the silos. You need to learn fast. You need employees who are really engaged in the process with a high level of psychological safety so they feel comfortable expressing their ideas and participating in the conversations about strategy. So it keeps us all focused on the things that are the most important. And because of that, OKRs are something that's different from KPIs. OKRs are for where you want to transform your business. You still need to keep track of the metrics that tell you that the lights are on, the machine is humming, all of that kind of thing. But OKRs are really about where you want to transform. They're about innovation, digital transformation, creating a different culture, radically improving business processes. They're not about continuous improvement. So the difference that we see here is we talk a lot about the balance between business as usual and OKRs. There are some organizations that are very project oriented and everything they're doing is a new thing. So they might have more OKRs than a business that's very transactional, where you've got a lot of time that you have to invest in business as usual. And this is also true of individual business functions. Often, for instance, an accounting department has a lot of business as usual. They need to post transactions. They need to close the books at the end of the month or the end of the year. They're really, a lot of their work is driven by what other people are doing. Your HR is hiring people. Purchasing is spending money. And all of those things need to be accounted for. So both of these are important. The business as usual is where we use what we might call health metrics. And an individual example of this is, for instance, I might have an OKR about what I want to do with my career or with my business or with my life, my family, whatever. But if I don't stay healthy, I can't achieve those things. So the health metrics, like my blood pressure or my weight, my diet, something like that, is something I need to keep within reasonable limits in order to be healthy enough to achieve the big things that I really want in life. And that's the difference between health metrics or KPIs and OKRs. So one mistake we see a lot of people make is coming up with way too many OKRs. And unfortunately, some of the early literature that some of you may have read would say things like, well, have 5 to 7 key results for each objective. And I think what a lot of us who spend our time consulting with people, what we've come to believe is actually the fewer, the better. We recommend no more than 3 plus or minus OKRs at any level in the organization. And then within each objective, have no more than 3 plus or minus 1 key results. The fewer that you have, the more attention you can focus on the things that are truly important. The other challenge some of you may have experienced that we see a lot is that people think of OKRs as a roadmap. And that's often a term that we see in things like digital transformation, software development. But OKRs are really not about a roadmap. A roadmap has a lot of very specific steps. What we're talking about with OKRs are the business outcomes. They are why we're taking those steps. So OKRs are not a roadmap, they're really the destination. And the reason that we focus on the destination is because there may be a lot of different ways to get to the top of this mountain, and we want to encourage cross-silo collaboration and innovative thinking in order to determine how to get there. Use the collective intelligence in your company or your organization in order to figure out where to go. That really simplifies the job of management. So one of the biggest problems that we see with people developing OKRs, it's very easy, particularly when you're talking about the key results, to come up with a list of tasks. Most humans think that way. We live inside of our to-do list, trying to get these things done every day. But key results are outcomes, they're impacts, and objectives are the reason why we're doing those things. So we need to keep a separation between a key result and a task. And often what we end up doing is coaching people to say, well, if you say your key result is we're going to train all staff, well, then we use the 5 whys. We say, well, why are you doing that? Well, because we want them all to be more competent at project management, let's say. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, we want to do that so we can get more projects done if we're better project managers. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, because we want to produce more features in our software in order to be more competitive. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, we want sticky customers. We want our customers to stay with us and not go to the competition. So why don't we have a key result that's one of those things that's a little bit higher in altitude, is the way that we talk about it. What's the real reason you're doing this rather than the thing that you're doing? You still need to manage projects, but that's not what we're talking about with OKRs. At the same time, there's actually more to OKRs than just writing OKRs. Usually with our clients, we start with, yes, we need well-crafted OKRs. So we train people, typically we'll train a team for up to 4 hours. What's a good OKR? What is your strategy? So we come up with OKRs that are well aligned to the strategy. So the CEO could look at that and say, oh, yes, I see why they're doing that and how that helps the organization. They're very clear and they're very actionable. That's step one. The second thing that you need to do is integrate them with your management processes. You're already having progress meetings to talk about things. How do we change the agenda of those meetings in order to incorporate OKRs? And in fact, what we've actually found is when people structure their regular weekly progress meetings around OKRs, instead of everybody going around the table doing a show and tell, you can actually reduce the amount of time that the whole group is meeting. We had one client who told us they reduced their weekly management meeting from 2 hours down to 20 minutes. They got a lot more done as a result of that. So determining how often are you going to talk about, do check-ins with your OKRs, how often are you going to review them and change them, that's what we call a cadence. So that's the management process that happens. And in some cases, OKRs may also have to do with the management process of performance appraisals, performance management for individuals. And I'm going to talk about that and focus on that in a little while, because I know for many of you who work in human resources, this will be of interest. And then finally, you need to develop the right culture. It needs to be a culture that supports stretching. That's one of the problems we run into if you don't take a look at your performance management system and how that integrates with OKRs. You may actually be encouraging people to be very careful about setting goals and conservative about setting goals, what we call sandbagging. And at the same time, you've got OKRs and you're trying to get people to stretch. So people need to feel that it's safe to stretch, it's safe to fail as long as you learn. And that's very much the cultural attitude that's come out of Silicon Valley, where OKRs came from. So we emphasize stretch, we emphasize learning and accountability, the ability of people to make commitments to each other, to work together on these OKRs and get them done and learn from them. So I'm going to spend a little more time now talking about culture and then move into talking about performance management. We found a number of typical cultural obstacles for people trying to implement OKRs, and I'd be really curious what your experience is with this, particularly those of you who are already using them. One of them is command and control. OKRs are not compatible with a culture of command and control. So if your leadership team sees this as a way to just know what everybody's doing and tell them what to do more effectively, it's not going to work. People will become very cynical about that. The best OKRs combine, top-down understanding of strategy, alignment with that, but also bottom-up, dealing with, in our department, this is what we're seeing, or this is a problem we've got. So you need to get the right balance between top-down and bottom-up OKRs. And that's going to depend on the function you're in. For instance, at Google, in an engineering team where everything they do is a project, they're 60% bottom-up goals because the engineers know what they're trying to do. And also, Google's unusual in that they make a lot of money on search. They're actually looking for new ideas to come up from their engineers that then they can capitalize on. So you want that top-down, bottom-up, and horizontal alignment going on in the organization, which is not compatible with a hierarchical command and control kind of culture. We also talk about overload. The title of my book that I wrote is Start Less, Finish More. We take on too many things. We live in a culture of overcommitment. So we try to be very heroic about all the things that we can get done, but how effectively are we actually doing anything if we take on too much? The neuroscientists tell us we don't perform as well if we try to do too many things. If you've got 5 projects, you're going to waste a lot of time context switching between them, and none of them will turn out as well as one that you're completely focused on. Set it and forget it. That's a problem when at the beginning of a quarter, we set the OKRs for a team, and then we just get busy, lots of things come up. We get to the end of quarter and we go, well, we just didn't get very far, did we? That's why you need a regular cycle of check-ins and conversations and the ability to say, hey, this isn't going well. How can we fix this? Are we actually doing the right tasks to get to this outcome, or do we need to pivot? Then there's what we call a slippage culture, the kind of culture where people make promises to each other and there are no consequences if we don't follow through. That doesn't work with OKRs. That encourages that set it and forget it kind of attitude. And finally, overall, if you have a low trust environment, people are not going to really share their ideas about where they think the team should go, and they don't feel safe enough to comment on what they're observing or how things are going. Now that's interesting because Google, they have a group called Rework within Google, and they do nothing but study team effectiveness within their company, and then they publish the results. So they looked at their most effective teams and said, what do these teams all have in common? And you can see all of these things. A lot of these things that are in the lighter green are things you actually get from OKRs. You can understand what's the impact on what the overall organization is trying to do. That gives me meaning and a sense of engagement, gives me structure and clarity. If we don't have a slippage culture and we're really good at following our commitments and accountabilities, we're more dependable. But the number one factor in team effectiveness, head and shoulders above the rest, was psychological safety. That's the ability to feel like you feel safe to express vulnerability. Like, I have an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I just want to throw it out. That's the opposite of a kind of culture where you need to have all your ducks lined up, have all kinds of evidence to back up anything you advocate, or people will criticize you. So you need something else there. So psychological safety is really key to making OKRs work. So what that tells us is that the way we have conversations, particularly conversations that lead to commitments to action, are really important. So a high performance organization is a culture and a healthy network of these kinds of conversations. So there's a lot of different kinds of conversations that go into good OKRs. First off, people need a shared understanding of the reality that they're operating in. We call that a conversation for observation. You know, do we have a shared view of what's going on? How important is the competition? So you could imagine in a company like Sears, they probably quit talking about the competition. They got very complacent about how they were doing. They weren't really observing changes in their market. The second kind of conversation is what we call the conversation for possibility. And that's where you say, well, all right, we've observed all these changes going on in our environment, but we can't do everything. Where are we going to focus our attention? What are the big strategic themes that we need to do? So when we work with clients, we take those big themes. We might say, well, we need to expand our market in South America, and we need to make this a better place to work, and we need more financial flexibility. Those might be big themes. So in the next stage, sorry, I missed one there, we turn those into concrete plans that are expressed as OKRs. So we call that a conversation for agreement. So when you set an OKR, that's what you're doing every quarter, conversation for agreement. I can't get into it right now, but every one of these conversations kind of has different rules and guidelines for how you have them. And then your weekly check-ins are conversations for action. What did we do about trying to get to this business outcome last week? Did we see any results for it? Is this the right thing to be doing? Conversations for action. And then finally, you also need conversations for learning. Often this is a step that people skip. We don't have time for it. We move on to the next thing. But we need to get together and think about, how do we learn from this? And again, when we work with our clients over a quarter, we'll set the OKRs, we have the weekly check-ins, we're tracking it in a software package, and then at the end of the quarter, we have a retrospective, which is a conversation for learning. Were we making the right assumptions when we set these goals? Were these goals too easy or too hard? Did something else emerge that we couldn't have anticipated? A pandemic, for example, that meant that we had to pivot. So how do we learn from all of that? So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about performance management, and then we'll take some questions. So I think one of the problems I see with performance management systems is they try to do a lot of different things. We're trying to drive alignment with strategic goals by driving goal setting, management by objectives down to an individual level. We're trying to support talent management so that we understand what's our human capital. Where do we need recruiting or training or some other kind of development? Supporting the individual's career development, and then also rewarding people equitably. So performance management systems do a lot of things, which actually makes it very challenging integrating them with a new OKR approach, because it's connected to so many different things. One of the problems I see with performance management systems, in my early career I was working in these, is there's an assumption that the performance of the organization is the sum of the performance of the individuals. And we know that that's not really true. That's why we say this, that OKRs are a team sport. People need, particularly if you're moving into new transformative things that you haven't done before, you need to work together. You need multiple perspectives. You need collaboration. collaborative action. Another thing that we know, besides that it's a team sport, is that if someone is paid enough, beyond a certain point, paying them more does not increase their motivation in proportion to what you're paying them, because people need to make a living, but what really motivates them in the long run are these intrinsic factors that Dan Pink talked about in the book Drive. That's autonomy. Like, I have the ability to form my own view of things and take my own actions. Mastery is I'm continually learning my job and getting better, and I feel connected with a larger sense of purpose. So this is something to think about when you look at the relationship between OKRs, performance management, and compensation. So particularly when you look at this factor, that according to this compensation firm, most employers don't actually believe that merit pay drives higher levels of individual performance, and yet we keep doing it. We've been doing it for a long time, and that's just the way human resources does things. But I think we need to challenge that and look at whether that's actually driving individual or organizational performance. And then we have the case of what happened at Adobe, which some of you may have read about. A formal, backward-looking performance management system is very time-consuming. There's lots of forms to fill out, lots of documentation, lots of justification. And what Adobe found was it was actually counterproductive. They were stack ranking employees, and even though they're in a war for talent, they've got a lot of smart people, if you're ranked at the bottom, you're very demoralized. And so they would actually find lots of people would quit after the annual performance management cycle. And they didn't want to lose those people. So they moved more toward a system of continuous performance management, which we've seen happening in a lot of organizations. Here's just a partial list of industry-leading companies that have gotten rid of annual employee performance ratings in favor of continuous performance management. So I just want to sum up here. You'll get a copy of these slides, and I've skipped a couple, but you'll be able to review those. Got quotes from a couple of other thinkers in this area. Let's just look at the overall trends that are going on then in performance management. This is really a summary of all of it. We're moving from a backward-looking annual retrospective of past performance to this idea of continuous performance management, where we emphasize having a lot of less formal conversations, don't necessarily have to be documented, that's focused on the future. If I'm your manager, how can I help you do a better job, rather than me being the judge and jury? So the manager really becomes more of a coach. The view of the employee has to be more holistic. We used to look at, try to fit the human being into a standard job description. Now we've turned that on its head. We recognize that business outcomes are not a matter of heroic individual effort in most cases, but they're a team sport. And so we need a looser coupling between these big stretch goals we have with OKRs and the way we do compensation. There still has to be some connection, but it's a looser coupling. So beyond that, I'll just say you can find a lot of these ideas in my book, available at Amazon. Start less, finish more. That's the key principle that we work with. Again, keep the focus, keep the alignment. So at this point, let's see if we have some questions. We can take however long we can take with that, and then we'll turn it over to Prabhakar.
Thank you, Daniel, for sharing your brief insights on how the new paradigm impacts areas of concern to the HR functional. Hope the session was quite informative for all the attendees. So if you have any questions, please be sure to type them into the question box, and we will answer them at the end of the session. So, before we move on to the next session, I would like to introduce Prabhakar Marimuthu. Prabhakar is the VP of Engineering at Synergita. He has more than 18 years of experience in developing products for various domains. He's basically a technologist who developed passion towards leveraging technology to solve the end user problems. He has been superheading the product development activities at Synergita, a leading SaaS product focusing on employee performance management and engagement. Prabhakar has rich knowledge implementing employee performance management and OKR solutions for more than 150 companies. With this, Prabhakar will brief us on implementing OKR for your organization. Over to you, Prabhakar.
Thanks, Jose. Thank you, Daniel, for the excellent presentation. It really provided great insights around OKR. So audience, what next, especially for companies who are still on spreadsheet and manual approaches, you have to overcome a few more challenges to implement OKR for your teams and for the organization successfully. How do you ensure that all the employees and stakeholders across the organization have accurate understanding about OKR? How do you ensure that that a consistent implementation of OKR across the organization? And how do you measure the progress percentage of objectives considering the key results, alignments, and so on? So here is where a software product like Synergita can come handy and allow you to focus on defining your objectives to meet your business needs. Synergita is a SaaS product which is focusing on employee performance, development, engagement. And recently we have included OKR into our portfolio. I'm going to show you a glimpse of the product before we jump into the QA session. This is our demo area, and I'm logging in as an employee. You land into a nice dashboard. Let me quickly get into the OKR product. So here you can see the company objectives, team, and the individual objectives. As an employee, I have access to all the company objectives, and I can see the exact objective, the increase the global revenue by 10x. This is an example objective, and I'm able to see the target and the key results and where we are with respect to each of these key result, and also the overall progress percentage. So this is the transparency which Daniel talked about in his presentation, right? So the company objectives are accessible for all the employees across the organization, and the statuses are also transparently available to the entire organization. Let me get into the individual's objective. As an employee, I have my own objectives defined here. You can see the objective key results defined. So a software product can like Synergita can actually help you understand, for employees to understand the structure of the OKR, the format of the OKR as such, right? And the product can actually take care of to ensure that only 3 company objectives are defined, and 3 or 4 key results are added to each of these objectives. So when it comes to OKR, less is more, and Synergita can actually help you to enforce it across the organization. Let me get into one of the objectives. So this is the detailed view where I'll be able to go and check and update the status of my objectives. And here, look at it. So my objective is aligned with the sales objective, the sales team objective, which is in turn aligned with the company objective. So this is where the alignment is going to help you in giving that additional motivation to those employees. Knowing the fact that I am contributing to a larger goal will give this additional motivation to all the employees across the organization. When it comes to OKRs, it's not about just defining it once and forget about it. You have to review the progress of the OKRs frequently on a continuous basis, and also, like in some cases I have seen few organizations even deciding to drop few OKRs which are no more valid as such. So you have to keep an eye on the progress of the OKRs and then do all the necessary adjustments and make it always relevant to the organization. And agile conversations is another very important aspect of OKR. So you have to encourage conversations. The stakeholders should be able to provide feedback. So this is where Synergita can greatly help you. In a single click, you can get into conversation mode and then seek help from other stakeholders, or you can also reach out to your managers for help. So these conversations are going to really help you in terms of letting the rest of the organization know about what you are expecting from the other teams, and you can talk about the progress which you have made and all of that. Let me quickly get into the OKR dashboard. So this is a nice dashboard which gives you the overall snapshot of OKRs across the organization, right? You can see the total number of OKRs which are available, created, progressing across the organization, and what is the overall cumulative progress percentage, right? This is a critical parameter for you to keep an eye on how the entire organization is progressing on the OKR front. And you can also check the overdue objectives, and you can quickly drill down and figure out where you have to pay your immediate attention. And the tool also helps you with the percentage of alignment. So we talked about the importance of alignment, right? So if you are like say a 100 employee sized organization, how do you ensure that the OKRs which are created at all the levels are aligned properly? The tool will help you to find out the percentage of alignment, and you can see the individual objectives, the statuses very clearly, how many have been completed, in progress, not started, and so on. So this progress trajectory is another important insight for those who follow OKR in your organizations. So this progress trajectory is going to help you to understand the expected progress versus the actual progress. So this green line indicates where you are supposed to be, and the blue line is where you are presently. This is the actual progress, and you can easily find out the gap and derive the action items to address the gap. The tool is also providing options to find out, understand the lead indicators, how many OKRs are leading and doing good, and how many are on track, lagging, and so on. So that drill down options will certainly help you to go to that individual, reach out to that individual, and then find out the challenge and fix the challenges. So this dashboard will help the leadership team to find out how each the department is performing inside the organization, which departments are doing and not doing well, and so on. So you can understand the gap between the overall the expected progress versus the actual progress, find out the deviation, and then address go and speak to the department head and figure out the challenges and then plan for overcoming the challenges. So that's the dashboard is going to help you to get hold of what is going on across the organization, and then address the areas where your attention is most required. So here is a partial list of our global customers. You can see a lot of good brands who we have worked with, and these companies are spread across varied industries such as IT, ITES, BPO, manufacturing, healthcare, and so on. And these companies are also of varied sizes, right from a few hundred employees to few thousand employees. This is the full stack of Synergita product. We provide end-to-end talent management solutions to all our customers, right from smart goal management, appraisal reviews, one-on-one meetings, rewards and recognition, continuous feedback, development, and so on. Here are some of our key differentiators. The product is very easy to use, and our users do not require any separate training as such. Most of the employees and managers can simply log in into the system and do actions without any difficulty. The OKR product is available as a mobile app in Android and iOS platforms, which is going to help you to increase the traction for OKR inside your organization. The employees and managers can update the progress on the go, and similarly the managers and leaders can also get hold of the status on the go. The configurable workflows will allow you to change the configurations according to your business needs. For example, say you need one level of approval today, and say 6 months, 1 year down the lane, you want to introduce an additional level of approval according to your business needs, and you might have grown and all of that, right? So Synergita is going to allow you to change the process according to your immediate needs, and we provide extensive reporting. We provide great insights into employee performance as well as organization performance in the OKR product, and we do data integrations with most of the top ERP and HCM products in the market, and we also offer single sign-on integrations with your AD, ADFS, Google authentication, and so on. So that's about it. Jose, can we get into the Q&A session?
Sure. So we'll take some time for questions now. Just a reminder to our attendees, if you have any questions, please be sure to type them into the question box. So we have a question. When the company grows, the strategy of the management changes, but not the efforts of employees, and these gaps be addressed by OKR module.
Okay, you want me to address that?
Yes, please, Dan.
Okay, can you just repeat that one more time for me? I want to make sure I got the question.
Sure. When the company grows, the strategy of the management, when the company grows, the strategy of the management changes, but not the efforts of employees, and these gaps be addressed by OKR module is the question.
Okay. Yeah, I think the way you would use OKRs would change over time, because often in a startup, for instance, you would want very simple OKRs that are tied to whatever is going to drive growth. And there's usually one or two numbers that are going to drive growth. You know, if you're selling a SaaS software product, it would be either like some engineering feature, like, you know, how many integrations have we got, or it would be how many users have we got, something like that. So you know, John Doerr in his book, Measure What Matters, talks about the early days of YouTube. Their whole focus was getting more users. So they wanted to get to 1 billion users. And they literally did that with that kind of a focus. I think what happens as an organization gets larger, it's going to get more differentiated, and it's harder to do that because you're in different markets with different characteristics. You have a bigger product line. You just have a lot more going on, and so there would probably be a little more diversity of the OKRs that you'd have, I would say.
All right. Thanks for that, Daniel. And we have another question. Can OKRs be used for our usual goals, or should it be only for stretch goals?
we like to talk about two kinds of OKRs. There are moonshots and there are roof shots. So the roof shots are goals that don't require a lot of learning, but they do require commitment and they require accountability and reporting. So it could be an example of, you know, I know how to create a new learning module to teach our clients. In order to make sure I actually get to it, I'll make that a roof shot. That actually can work more easily for individuals, because if you know how to get it done, you can get it done. The moonshot idea, you know, comes from the original moonshot when President Kennedy, 1961, said we're going to go to the moon by the end of the decade. No, there was a lot that was not known about how exactly to do that. How do you keep people alive in space? How do you get the rocket there and back? Lots of questions like that. So with a moonshot, there are a lot more things that you just don't know, and you don't even know what you don't know yet. So you need a lot more experimental kinds of OKRs in a case like that.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. And then we have another question. What kind of customization Synergita OKR can offer? Prabhakar, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. So I touched base about the configurable options which are available in the product. So on the product, we what we do, we ensure that all the options which are required for each customer, right from small customers to medium sized to large, our product management team do a study how OKRs are getting implemented for each of these organizations, list down the configurations or customizations which are typically required for these organizations. So we have loaded all those combinations of behaviors as configurable options into the product. So during implementation, we work very closely with those customers and enable those behaviors which are important for their respective organizations.
Great. So will the recording be shared after the webinar? Yes, we will share the recorded version of this webinar to your registered email ID. And then we have another question of what kind of training should be given to the employees before rolling out OKR? Daniel, would you like to answer this?
Sure. Yeah, we believe anybody working with OKRs needs a certain amount of training. I mean, we typically often start with the top management team, and we would take more time with them because we need to understand what their strategy is and make sure we're translating that. But really, anybody who's involved is going to need, some level of training just to understand, especially if you're asking them to write an OKR, they need to understand what a well-crafted OKR looks like. Yeah, because otherwise, again, people will often, the key results are really a to-do list, and that's not the idea.
Yeah. So, all right. So we have another question. Should the OKRs be implemented to the entire organization at a stretch, or should it be step-by-step process? If it is a step-by-step, how should we go about it?
It depends on the size of your organization. In a really large enterprise, it might make sense to just do it in one particular business unit or team. When we're working with a mid-market size company, we really recommend starting with the executive team and then working our way down, because if you're asking people mid-level in the organization to do OKRs, they need to make sure they understand what they're aligning to in terms of the strategy and the OKRs at the top of the organization. Having said that, one of the big problems can be moving too fast. So we've seen people that we set them at the executive level, and the next thing you know, they're demanding every team come up with them and every individual come up with them over the next 2 weeks, and that's just going too fast. It's better to start with the senior team and maybe one level down and run that for a quarter so people have experience with it before you go further down.
All right. Thanks for answering that, Daniel. And the next question we have is, can the tool give me quick insight on the process of the employees? Because we do not have time to check each and every team member's progress amid a busy schedule. Prabhakar, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. So this is the whole purpose of we developed the OKR status dashboard. So this dashboard can be enabled for all the managers across the organization, and the department heads and leaders will also have access to this dashboard. They can find out the status of OKRs within their teams and also across the organization in a single view. They can check the overall progress as well as the progress at the individual level using these dashboards. And we also have the email notifications and mobile app notifications, which gives info about the status of OKRs across the organization to all the stakeholders.
All right. Thank you, Prabhakar and Daniel. Thank you so much for answering these questions, and I hope the answers were helpful. And it looks like we have covered all our questions. We appreciate all our attendees for taking time answering your questions. And so, Daniel, is there anything else you want to cover before we wind up? Is any points that you would like to add?
No, I just thank you very much for having me.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. If you have any further questions, please write to info@synergita.com and we will answer them. We will also share the recorded version of this webinar with all of you. Like somebody asked, we will definitely share the recorded version with you. So, and also you will be receiving survey questions at the end of the session. We appreciate if you could provide your feedback for the same. We will love to hear from you. And thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Thank you.